The mushrooms that we use are grown in licensed growers and tested in licensed labs. We know how strong and how potent each mushroom batch is, which is really helpful. Honestly, I think that is the biggest shift that most people find after doing a psilocybin journey is that they're more able to stay present. It's not that it's easy, and it's still, still a muscle that has to be flexed in order to build it, right? I think psilocybin can be helpful for folks that have trouble being alone with themselves, especially. The way that it's done through this kind of therapeutic model is very different than like if you were to take a bunch of mushrooms, go out into the forest and commune with the trees, what have you, or go to a big dance party or using it more recreationally. That's a little different. Nothing wrong with that, but very different. Yeah.
Welcome back to our show, Empower Your Life with Cindy Marie. Let me introduce you to our next guest. She is the founder of Tree of Life Facilitation Services and Purple City Experience, an Oregon state licensed psilocybin facilitator. She is passionate about guiding intentional and transformative with a client-centered approach. Her mission is to help people connect with their own self-healing abilities and build deeper connections with their own or themselves and their source. In today's episode, we're going to cover some of the vulnerability, authenticity, mindfulness, and transformation, and of course, psilocybin with our next guest, Michelle Harrell. Michelle, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, so let's get started, Michelle.
Yes, let's do.
Okay, well, on our show, we have tradition, Michelle. We normally ask our guests to share their humble beginnings. In your case, how did psilocybin even came to the picture? And perhaps that lead you to inspiration of having this or operating these services that you have. Share with us your story or journey that lead you or led you where you are today.
Sure. Oh gosh. Well, so going back to I kind of have to go back to 2014. I'm going to start in 2014.
Okay.
So I had been living overseas in the Netherlands for 18 years. So most of my adult life, I moved there right after college. Ended up getting married, raising my family there, went to work for Nike over there at their European headquarters and had a big, wonderful, lovely career at Nike. I loved it for a very long time. And then in 2014, Nike actually relocated myself and my family back to the US, to Portland, Oregon. I would say at that point in my life, there was a lot of change happening, right? So not only was I having to move with my family and my two small kids, across the ocean back to the United States after being gone for 18 years. So that's a lot of change.
Yes.
But in that same year, we had lost my grandfather and my father to prostate cancer. My grandfather died of old age. My father died of prostate cancer. And so, there was a lot of, just a lot of grief and things around, when you lose two people so close to you and so close to each other. A lot of change, a lot of emotions. So for my kids as well, a lot of change happening, uprooting them, moving them to a country that they'd never lived in. They didn't speak, they spoke English, but it wasn't their first language. Dutch was their first language. So, a lot of change happening. At the same time, my ex-husband was not able to move with us because we were waiting on his green card and he is Dutch. So the kids and I actually moved in July of 2014. He didn't join us until the following year in March of 2015. So it was just a very stressful year, trying to get my kids acclimated to new culture, new schools, new everything. I myself knew, while I had still, I had worked for Nike for a long time, my time at Nike, most of it was in Europe. And so moving here and working at world headquarters, just a lot of change for me as well. Yes. Fast forward, in 2017, I was going through a separation with my ex-husband, and we had agreed that he would move out at a particular date. It was a very amicable divorce, to be honest, and we are great co-parents, and we still, talk to each other all the time. But at the same time that was happening, I actually got laid off at Nike.
Oh, wow.
So within the same week, I got laid off on a Thursday, and my ex-husband moved out on Saturday. So, it was not part of my plan. And so between then and fast forward to kind of 2019, just a lot of change, right? So between 2014 and 2019, just a lot of change in my life. And I was definitely at some point, the beginning of 2019, I was feeling very burnt out, very lost, very confused about what I wanted in my life and what this next chapter should look like. Did not plan to be a single, unemployed divorced mom with a mortgage, was not part of the plan. At that point, I was working again, but I was not that happy in my job. I had kind of burnt out, for sure. I was burnt out. Looking back, all the signs were there. And I had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment on my kitchen floor in the beginning of 2019. I had decided I was ready to start dating, and I had gone on a few dates, which were not great. And gosh, just so much going on, right? And so at that point, I was not a very religious person. In fact, I was very anti-religion and anti-organized religion, and had really not felt called to that most of my life. But at that point in my life, I found myself on the floor of my kitchen crying and having a conversation with God about, I need help. I basically prayed for surrender and asked him to help me to surrender. It wasn't something that came naturally to me. I was very much a type A personality and all about, trying to control my circumstances. I'm a big planner, and so always planning the next thing. Yeah. Always have a big to-do list, always checking things off. I sourced a lot of my worth, my self-worth from my career and from those accolades and, that kind of thing. And so at that point was just very lost, feeling very lost. And so I said this little prayer, asked, God to help me surrender. And literally just a couple weeks later, I met the man that is still in my life. We had our first date. And then several months later, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, came into my life. I was not someone who had ever considered anything like that. Even though I lived in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam for a long time, I actually never, was not a cannabis user. I had never done any kind of drugs other than alcohol. And so it was all very foreign to me, but somebody brought this into my life that I trust greatly. And I had read about it. I had been reading How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, and I had been learning about how psychedelics can help with mental health, or just helping folks kind of reconnect with themselves. And so I decided I wanted to give it a try. And so that really kind of set me on a path that brought me to today. So between 2019 and 2022, I did about 5 or 6 psilocybin journeys, and every single time found new insights, new relief from whatever was happening in my life. Found my way to God. I had a real God experience during a couple of them, but one was major. And honestly, that was hard to integrate afterwards, because I had been someone who was so anti-organized religion, anti kind of Christianity, all of that, for a lot of reasons, political and otherwise. And so to find myself suddenly entertaining the idea that I wanted to learn more about that was very foreign to me. So all that to say, that set me on this path, and I started wanting to read and study more on these little plants. And I thought, wow, if they can help somebody like me who, I wouldn't say I was depressed or highly anxious. I definitely was burnt out, definitely feeling lost. But I thought, if they can help somebody like me, what else can they do? And through my research and my current passion of wanting to know everything about these mushrooms and how they could benefit others, I stumbled across the research that Johns Hopkins was doing with terminally ill cancer patients,
Mm,
and really helping folks struggling with a terminal diagnosis come to terms with that and find peace for themselves in that, face their fear of death, face their anxiety around it. And that really tug at my heartstrings,
mm,
given that my father had passed away just a few years prior, and kind of watching, how that had an impact on my mom and how it impacted me and the whole family and him, obviously, and thought, man, I really want to help other people find relief from whatever they're suffering from. But really, the end of life stuff really called to me. That was what my big why was in the beginning. And so I kept that on the back burner, was still working, obviously, but again, not that happy in my job. Knew I wanted to do something different. My children are older now at that point, and so I'm looking at like becoming an empty nester and thinking about, okay, I'm have different options at that point, right?
yeah.
And so at one point in the fall of 2022, my boyfriend texted me and he said, "Hey, I just saw in the news that Oregon is going to start issuing their licenses for this legal program in January of 23. So you've been talking about this." He kind of was like, "Hey, put your money where your mouth is," right? And
Yeah.
so I made a decision, and I thought, yeah, this is something I want to do. And it was not something I would have ever considered, 10 years prior. I was not that big of a risk taker in my past, but I suddenly felt very called to want to help others
Yeah.
find their own voice, find what makes them tick, and ultimately, help them find relief from whatever might be ailing them. And there's just so many use cases for psilocybin. So I went, did my training, did the exam process, got my license in August of 2023, and I've
Mm,
been seeing clients ever since. So yeah, that's how I started Tree of Life, my facilitation services. And then as I started seeing clients, majority of my clients are flying in for this treatment because Oregon and Colorado are currently the only two states that have any kind of legal program. Oregon was first. So at that point in time, Oregon was the only state. And so a lot of my clients are flying in from out of state and even out of country. And so I very quickly recognized that there was a need and a gap in the market to offer like a full retreat package for these folks, because people often asked me, where should I stay, and what should I do the day after, and like all these kinds
yeah.
of things. And staying in a hotel room is not always the best aftercare environment. Most people want to have access to nature. They want a more kind of serene and peaceful environment. And so a hotel room, is not always the best option. So that led me to create Purple City Retreats. And so I created I put a yurt on my property. For those who might not know, a yurt is like a very fancy tent. And it's very glamped out, but there's something about that round shape of the yurt that is just so inviting for folks when many of my clients describe it as feels like a hug when you walk in.
Oh,
And it gives you that access to nature. Even if you're indoors, you feel like you're connected, because it really is kind of like a big tent, right? So you feel like you're connected to the outdoors. We have a sauna and a cold plunge and an outdoor shower on site. So that having those amenities can really be helpful for folks who are wanting to reground in their
yeah.
body after having such an experience, because sometimes that can take a minute, to kind of come back to this world. Even if you've sobered up, technically, you're still kind of reeling from the emotions of the
Yeah.
experience. So yeah, so that was a very long story. Sorry, but that is what brought me to today. And yeah, I'm loving what I'm doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can really tell the way how you share your journey. And this is one of those things that I really love to hear from many people that I have interviewed, not just in the guests, but also outside. And that our journey really led us to what will be our mission and purpose. And that's why talking or sharing all of these journeys are very, very amazing to hear. It's because you realize that, oh my God, at some point, we are all having that sense of mission and purpose. And I think we are all given that gifts, and it's up really to us whether we want to be awakened or not. But I do believe that through our journey, our dedicated journey, we are able to understand what are those things that makes me feel like what you said makes me tick, having that compelling action. And for you, not so much religious person turned into believing. And now you have the guidance, what else that you can do. And I think the key point there that I'm hearing, which really resonated with me, is we all want to serve, we all want to be useful and helpful and have something to offer before we leave this body. you know
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of time and awareness. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I'm super, super sure that a lot of people have very, very thankful that now there are two states that
Yeah.
providing these services for helping other people that might not be applicable of doing just a conversation, or there will be a need of additional tool. And in this case, psilocybin or mushrooms will be the applicable for other people. And we're gonna talk that a little bit later on to dive deeper about the psilocybin, because I think it's very important to talk about that more, and so people would have a better understanding. But before that, I want to talk about staying present and being mindful, especially with the world that we're living right now. Michelle, why do you think that many people having a hard time
Yeah.
to stay present and being mindful? What are those things that causing that?
Great question. And honestly, I think that is the biggest shift that most people find after doing a psilocybin journey is that they're more able to stay present. It's not that it's easy, and it's still, still a muscle that has to be flexed in order to build it, right? But yes, there's so many distractions in our world, right? And I think especially in American culture, but also in others, we have all kind of collectively bought into this fast pace that we live at, and that faster is better because time is money, right? We've all been taught time is money, but I like to challenge that a lot.
Same.
Because honestly, I think a lot of the problems we're seeing today with addiction, mental health, suicide, nutrition, physical health, I think a lot of it has to do with this lie that we've been told that faster is better. With technology, I love technology just as much as the last person. My last real job, quote, real job, right before I went to work for myself was in IT. So that's kind of where my background is in systems and processes. So I love technology when it helps us and it can make our lives easier. And I love, all kinds of there's, I love being able to stream my music or my shows or what have you. But I think we haven't quite learned how to set healthy boundaries for ourselves with technology. I know we talk a lot about our kids and, how it's going to impact them. But I already, the adults that I see in my work, it's impacting us too. So it starts with us. We have to model that behavior. I myself am guilty. I look back on, when Facebook first came out, I was a new mom, and so I probably spent way too much time on there, right? I look back and there are things that I wish I would have done differently. I wish I would have, been a more present parent when my kids were younger, because that time is so precious and it goes so quickly. But yeah, I really think that number one, fast culture. Number two, I think a lot of us haven't been taught how to feel our feelings. We like anything that's uncomfortable, we like to just move on as quickly as possible, and we want the quick fix, and we don't want to have to deal with anything that feels hard, whether that's physical pain or emotional pain. But like, we want the quick fix in America. I'm talking about the collective we. And I think that is another reason why we're seeing, the mental health numbers that we're seeing, and suicide numbers and addiction numbers. Like, we are looking for a fix. We're looking to distract ourselves, or we're looking to numb ourselves, or we're compartmentalizing. and like I'll get to that later. We're in survival mode, but that all catches up to us at some point, and typically it is around midlife when those things start to catch up. And that tends to be. I have clients of all ages, but the majority of my clients are middle aged, and I find that that is a trend at that point in your life where you might start having some physical problems, right?
Yes.
Physical illness. I think the latest number in the US is like 40% of Americans have at least one chronic disease, and so many have there's another high percentage that has two or more, which quite alarming. And I find that a lot of times that our bodies are our allies, and they give us clues to where we need to do work. A lot of times the physical pains and aches and pains and things start to kind of let us know that maybe there's something else going on that is
Mm-hmm.
more emotional, but our body tries to warn us, and we often try to ignore it, or we just want a quick fix like a pill or
Yeah.
a potion or whatever it is to make it go away without really addressing the root. And so I think that that's a big part of today's problem and why it's so difficult to be mindful, because mindfulness requires stillness,
Yes.
and it requires you to fully be present with whoever you're in the room with, whether that's yourself or someone else. And how many times I will say, I go out to dinner sometimes and I watch people in the restaurant. Everyone, a lot of people are on their phones. They're not even connecting with the people that are there with them. I watch my daughter, my youngest daughter, who's a senior in high school this year, and I watch her with her friends, and sometimes they're all together, but they're all on their phones. So they're talking to each other, but they're all like looking at their phone. And I just think, man, I hope that they also put those away sometimes. But it's a real epidemic. It really is. And I think that is kind of the key, is slowing down, getting quiet, and being still with yourself.
Yeah, love it, love it. And that's the reason why I'm just like you. I challenge the status
Mhm.
quo. So, as when it comes to being entrepreneur, right? We want to, of course, have the result of what hard work that we're doing. However, when it comes to our services that we're doing, it requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of trust, and it's a relationship kind of service,
Mhm.
right? So, and speaking about technology, I think definitely one of those things that I always mention when I'm having a conversation with my husband or other people. I do believe, I don't know in terms of in US, but I do believe that education must change the system.
Mhm.
That requires every new technology, put the subject in the school and have a training. What are the pros and cons? So, for example, these gadgets, because they do help us a lot. But if, for example, majority, in this case, majority, right? They're not able to be so conscious and so self-aware that, hang on a second, I've been spending time for hours, and then you
Yeah.
realize I didn't do anything much apart from that. Where does the time go?
Yeah.
And I think that requires a lot of self-awareness and also self-consciousness that I believe lead to the next question that I have for you, which is about authenticity. I
Mhm.
think that's very relatable to what we are just discussing, being present and being mindful. It requires of inner work, and that's stepping back, of knowing who you are, of
Mhm.
knowing what clicks with you, what are those formulas. And really, I'm also guilty because whether you believe it or not, I'm very conscious with my body. And I know a lot of people, you don't look like someone that would require, but I was really. So
Mhm.
I did all of those things like pill, potion, whatever. But I
Yeah.
also have a very, very physically active. So over time, it took me a long time to realize that it's in here, it's
Mm.
inside.
Yeah.
It's an inner work. So to continue our conversation with all of these things, what do you believe that holds people back from being their true authentic self? What are the
Mm.
common challenges? And you can share as well your experience
Yeah.
as how you overcome that. And it's a lifelong journey. It's not a
It
one
is.
step, okay, I'm an authentic already.
No, true. I think our egos,
Oh,
our egos can be our ally, but they can also get in our way, right? And
mm,
I think it's very natural as you grow up. All of us are guilty or do it, right? As you grow up, we want to be liked, we want to be loved, we want to
mhm,
be accepted. And so as kids, we immediately start to learn to look outside ourselves for that. Because you don't want to be the kid who doesn't get picked, right? For the party or for the sports team or whatever it is, right? Kids want to be included, and I think it's a very natural kind of human process to start to bend and shape and mold ourselves to fit to what we think other people want. And unfortunately, we all do that, but it kind of stays with you
mhm.
for many of us into adulthood. And at some point, you start to realize, like, oh, well, what do I like? It's like, what do I like, and who do I want to spend my time with, and how do I want to spend my energy? But before you can kind of get to those questions, there has to be this reconnection with self. And a lot of the adults I see in my practice, don't know what they like. They don't even know themselves anymore because they've been bending and conforming and trying to please, especially women. Women are very,
Yeah.
guilty of wanting to be people pleasers. I'm not saying only women, but a lot of women that I see, especially if there's been any kind of trauma in their past, we start to build walls to protect. And you start to lose yourself. When people talk about losing themselves, I think that's how that happens. You're constantly focused outside yourself
Yes.
for self-worth, approval, value. And it's when you start to return to that inner voice and you get quiet with yourself that you start to maybe unravel some of that has happened over the years, and you can start to really unpack for yourself what it is you like and what it is you want to do, and find your way to purpose, right? But it is a journey, and it's, we've all been in a situation where you're somewhere and you walk into a room and you suddenly feel like, oh, are people looking at me? Are they judging me? Or do I fit in here? Right? And many of us live 24 hours in our own
Oh,
heads, which makes it very difficult to be authentic, but also makes it very difficult to actually connect. And I am a firm believer that it's actually through being vulnerable and being authentic that we find connection and we build trust. Because
yeah.
when I share my personal story or my personal truth or my struggle or whatever it is, that invites others to also share their story. And it's through that we create that trust and that connection, which is really what everyone wants. We're all
Mm,
searching for a deeper connection. I think we're all searching for deeper meaning. But yet we often self-sabotage ourselves because we do live up here, and we often are worried about what others are thinking or saying, or about us. And usually those people are in their own head thinking the same thing, which is so ironic, right? Like, I've had clients who come out of their experience and talk to me. I had one client tell me for years she couldn't relax around her in-laws because she always assumed her in-laws were judging her for some reason, right? Whatever her past and stories that she tells herself. But after her psilocybin journey and experience, some of the insights that came forward for her was like, oh, I'm not the only one that's doing that. Other people are doing that too. And so she actually let me know that after the very next time that she got together with her in-laws after our experience together, that she still did it, right? Because it's
yeah.
not overnight, it's not a quick
Yeah.
fix. She found herself starting to ruminate and do the thing in her head, like, oh, is my shirt okay? Do I have food on my face? Like whatever is going on. And she immediately was able to kind of go, wait, stop. Like, I know this is the story I tell myself, but it's not true. And she was
Mm,
able to really actually finally that first time enjoy the time with her in-laws and not be in her head. And she told me it was one of the best like visits that they'd ever had, and that she finally felt like she was able to start to form some connection with them, which I think is so beautiful, right? So But it's just those little things, those little moments, those little shifts that people often find afterwards that help them come back to themselves.
Yeah, yeah. And going back to to the journey that you have shared earlier, unfortunately, sometimes things happen in a tragical way
Mm-hmm.
for you to really surrender and slow down and talk to yourself like, what am I supposed to do now? I mean, one of the examples before I came to where I'm now, I'm a people pleaser. That's always been my story. And to please people, to be part of the cool group, you're just kind of the yes person. And over time, I just realized, like the word you said, I'm lost. What's
Mm-hmm.
happening with me? And I think one of many things that causing a lot of people to stop not being their true authentic self, it's because we have this narrative and we are going to experience that. I think you can resonate with this, that once you commit that you're going to share your true authentic self, you are going to shaken your surroundings, meaning that people might not liking
Oh,
your
yeah.
true self. And
That's
then
right.
you have to weigh, okay, things are happening, so then what? And for me, I have to let go a lot of people in my life, and that's really, really painful. And over time, the beauty and the worth, that's why I'm very strong believer to encourage people that, knowing yourself is the best gift that you could ever give to yourself, to serve people. Because after going through that, you feel peace. You have that
Yes.
serenity. You can do that stillness. And the most important that I think a lot of people feeling afraid is being alone.
Oh,
What do
for
you
sure.
think of that?
No, yeah, definitely. And that is one reason also why I think psilocybin can be helpful for folks that have trouble being alone with themselves, especially.
Mm.
The way that it's done through this kind of therapeutic model is very different than like if you were to take a bunch of mushrooms, go out into the forest and
No. Yeah.
commune with the trees, what have you, or go to a big dance party, or you're using it more recreationally. That's a little different. Nothing wrong with that, but very different.
Yeah.
The way that it's done when somebody hires me, it's a very personal journey. It's very internally focused, and that is very challenging for many people.
Yeah.
Especially the period from the time that they initially dose and take the mushrooms until they launch. That waiting period can be a struggle for many people. It's the first time many people have sat still with themselves without a phone in their hand, without a distraction, and just had to sit alone with their own thoughts. And that can be really, really, really difficult for a lot of people. Which is why I'm there and why, people hire me to try to help them with that. But surrendering to that stillness and surrendering to just letting those thoughts come can feel very scary for someone who has been avoiding themselves for very many years, right? Especially if there's trauma, especially if there are things that you've done that you might, regret or not feel good about. Like the thought of having to sit still with that and confront that for yourself can be very scary. I had one woman who, she was starting to launch, and so things were starting to happen for her, and it frightened her a little bit. She got scared. And so she's like, okay, Michelle, things are happening, but I don't like, this is feeling scary, right? Help me. I'm there with her, holding her hands. We're talking through it. And as we were talking through it, first, I helped them breathe to calm their nervous system. And then I said, what's the fear? Like, what is the actual fear that is happening for you right now? Are you, what's going on? And after some conversation, and we got to the root of it, which was, she literally said, I'm afraid of my own mind. She was afraid of dealing with whatever had been under the surface for many years that she just kept ignoring, right? Which is, it's common and it's human nature, because we don't want to deal with stuff that is upsetting. We want to just have joy. But really, joy and pain are two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
You can't have one without the other. And I think once you realize, like, there's beauty in the pain too. If you can find gratitude when you're going through a struggle or going through something, that you don't have to like it, like grief is a perfect example. We lose somebody that we love. Of course, we don't like it. Of course, we're sad. Of course, we're, maybe even depressed, angry. There's all kinds of emotions that might come up around grief. But if you can try, even when you're in the midst of the pain of it, if you can recognize the blessing that you had time with that person at all, and that they touched your life in some way, I get teary, then that can help pull you through and just feeling our emotions. I think we haven't been modeled, that has not been modeled for us as kids, many of us, right? I think a lot of parents, myself included, guilty as charged, when your child, especially toddlers and young children, if they're having a temper tantrum or an emotional outburst, parents, we often want to correct the behavior, and we do that. We correct the behavior by whatever punishment or consequence you have in place, but we don't often address the emotion.
Yes.
And I think that is a problem. And I'm guilty of it as well. Definitely. As a young mom, I didn't know to do that because it wasn't modeled for me either. Right. So I think helping our kids to be able to express their emotions in a more healthy way would just that alone could change the world. If we gave our kids space to okay, I know you're upset because you can't have the candy at the store or whatever it is. Right. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about, obviously, age appropriate, right? A 3-year-old's not going to have the same conversation a 12-year-old has, but letting them express their feelings, but showing them how to do that in a more constructive, healthy way, I think is important. But we're busy, we're on the go. Kids having a temper tantrum in the middle of the store, and mom doesn't have necessarily the patience or the presence to do that in that moment. And I get it. We've all been there. None of us are perfect. So but yeah, I think that's really a big part of this experience for many people, is the first time in a long time that they've had space and stillness and quiet and a chance to just be with themselves for a solid 6 hours, because a journey is usually around 4 to 6 hours. So that's a long time to just lay on a couch and be very, very present and very conscious of what's happening for you internally.
Yeah, that's a lot. But what I'm hearing from what you said, I think, and it's not only related to authenticity, but even with other people, what we are missing in this moment. First, like what you said with this client of yours, afraid of her mind. I think what's missing there is actually mind shifting. We have this tendency to keep running back to the same narrative. And we can't blame ourselves as well, especially if we don't have the surroundings that will change that. So, and that requires a lot of awareness, right? But I think first thing I believe, the moment that you tell yourself that I want to evolve, I want to get out of this, whatever it is. And I think that's the first step that could help you really lead you to knowing yourself. And then you mentioned about this conversation with kids as a parent or vice versa. I think what I'm seeing, and a lot of people actually get shocked when I'm always telling this to clients or even a casual conversation. My number one client, VVIP, is my husband. Because if I can't walk the talk to my husband, my coaching, whatever I'm doing, it means that I'm not really practicing it more in depth. Meaning to say, because they are the person that will trigger you no matter what.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So when you mention that having a conversation, I think it's very important to talk about deeper understanding. We just don't talk. We not try, but we do our best to understand the other person. And normally I would say, especially when my husband and I get triggered, I will always remind myself, if there's something that I have mentioned to you that hurts you, let's talk about that. Why do you feel hurt about that? What are those things that I don't understand yet? Talk to me. Because if you don't talk to me, I wouldn't understand you. But I do believe that you want us to have a better and deeper understanding. It's just the same thing when we're having a conversation with kids. And I would challenge a lot of people, especially parents, that just because we're parents doesn't mean that we have all the right interpretation. Sometimes, kids are very smart that they're like, you just ask something and they will just say something back to you that you never thought, where did you get that information from? They have their own wisdom. And I
Oh,
think
100%.
we
Yeah.
we we have that to give that curiosity to let the kids to talk. And what do you think? You'll be surprised they have even answer for you. And sometimes, again, going back to what you said about the ego and pride could slap in your face that, oh my
Mhm.
God. But it actually, again, shifting that I'm proud of my kids. Wow. They have something to say that I never thought about that. Now, moving
Yeah.
to your psilocybin, which I totally agree. Not everyone having that sense of facing yourself by yourself in this strange or alien place. And I believe that since there's still two states, even though a lot of people already talk about it, but I
Mhm.
do believe that it's very important to have a deeper conversation. What is really psilocybin? And what are those common misconceptions do people have about psilocybin as a tool for transformation? Could you differentiate how could it be as a tool for transformation and how it could not be, literally? So share with us since you're the expert with this.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, yeah. So, what I like to tell people is it's not a quick fix, it's not a magic pill, it's not gonna, while some people do, I would say about 30% of my clients have like really big shifts and really big insights that kind of knock them on their butt, right? Or kind of turn their life upside down a little bit. Kind of like what I had with my belief system around faith,
Yeah.
right? I was a non-believer. I came out of this experience thinking, holy crap, like my whole belief system has just been shifted, like
Mm.
turned upside down, and I didn't know how to move forward with that. So, while most people are hoping for like this huge aha kind of like whoa, right, it's actually quite difficult to integrate those shifts afterwards. Those folks tend to
Mm.
have more trouble after integrating. So what usually happens for the majority of people is it's like little seeds are planted that happen. And so it really helps people get unstuck, helps people to often pull up and see that they're part of something much bigger, something, what, regardless of what your belief system is or faith or what have you. Almost everyone comes out of this experience feeling like, oh my gosh, like there's more to this world than meets the eye. There's more, like, at least, many people feel very connected to nature, or understanding
Mm.
that love is everything, and that love is what connects all of us, right? And that there's this energy of love, and really just, it's like when you go to the ocean and you feel so small by looking out,
Mhm.
it's very similar to that kind of experience. So seeds are planted, which must be cultivated to grow. And that is what, when we talk about integration and why integration is so important, if you might have all kinds of beautiful insights that come forward, but if you the next day go back to your
Go
normal
back.
life and you don't
Yeah.
spend any time reflecting and paying attention and trying to be more present and more mindful as you move through life, then it will end up I mean, you might gain some things from it, but it will be more of just an experience in a point of time, rather
Mm.
than the start of something new for you. But most people do cultivate and grow those seeds, right? And that is where the shift happens. And so I often, I like to warn people about that. It's going to get harder before it gets better a lot of the times, because you might come away with like, oh my gosh, now I see things very differently, but I don't know how to make sense of that quite yet. Or,
Mhm.
um, for folks who have like really very specific intentions around, behavior changes, or reducing their alcohol consumption, or quitting smoking,
Mhm.
that's still a journey. It's not like one session and you come out and you're,
Yeah.
I don't want cigarettes anymore. Although I've had a few clients who have quit smoking and told me that was like they made a decision that that's what
Yeah.
they wanted to do, and then they were able to do it, and they had never been
Mhm.
able to do that prior. So, there are those folks that does happen for. But yeah, so, it really just helps people get unstuck. It rewires your brain. It's kind of like a reset of your brain. If you think about, Michael Pollan tells this story, and it's a great one. If you're skiing down a snowy mountain and you're following the same path every day, then those grooves get deeper and wider, and you end up staying in those paths, right? And that's kind of what happens with our behaviors and our stories over time in our brain. They become like on automatic pilot. But what psilocybin kind of does is it's like a fresh layer of snow. So those paths are no longer so visible, and now your brain and your conscious is able to see other new connections that you might not have been able to see before.
So,
um,
sorry to cut you, Michelle.
yeah.
Could you help us to kind of bring to step by step? How does it work? Like,
Okay,
do
sure.
you
Yeah.
do a ritual first? Because I think a lot of people have that understanding already how it could feel. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the moment you enter, what are they
Mm-hmm.
going to expect? So that
Yeah.
they can bring the self-awareness that, okay, this is what I'm gonna expect for the 10 minutes, whatever, however they're gonna do it, because I obviously never done it. So
Mm.
I think it's very important to get into that first few steps, and then however, if it's going to chew or it's going to drink, whatever, and then
Yeah.
15, 10, 20 minutes, and then you're slowly gonna have that experience of a moment of sensations. I think it's very important where we can go through with that.
Yeah, sure. Yes, so we do preparation together always. So, there's a lot of talk around intention setting, set and setting. Set is really your mindset going into it, which in my opinion is the most important success factor. And then setting is the actual environment where you do it. But we talk through all of that. We talk through your fears and your concerns and what to expect and all the good things. But on the day itself, yeah, most folks are taking it. The mushrooms that we use are grown in licensed growers and tested in licensed labs. So we know how strong and how potent each mushroom batch is, which is really helpful. Because in the underground, really the only way that most people know to dose their mushrooms is by the weight of the mushrooms. But of course, it's a living plant, so each plant can be a little different, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one really great benefit about working in this legal system is our dosing is much more accurate and much more consistent because we actually kind of know how strong they are. But most people are taking whole mushrooms, and they're usually ground up in like a powdery fine form, and you take them with typically a hot drink, tea, hot chocolate. There's different options. And onset is on average about 20 to 30 minutes. Some people launch sooner, some people take a little longer, but on average it's 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
And then once you start to launch, the first 2 hours you're still launching. So you're having an experience, things are happening, but you're kind of still climbing to that peak, right? You're not quite. And then around the 2 hour mark is when people typically peak. And then that peak lasts for another couple of hours. So between 2 to 4 hours, you're in this peak experience. And then you start to typically come down between 4 and 6. These are all averages. Everybody's a little bit different.
Yes.
But typically what happens for people, there can be visuals where you start to have a lot of people see all kinds of imagery or fractals or different colors, especially with music. Can be really beautiful. But it's a very inner journey, and everyone's journey is different. So there's no right or wrong way. There's no good or bad way. Many journeys for people involve both hard things and beautiful things. It's usually a mixture of both. But there can be some struggles. There can be some serious emotions that arise for people. I've had people full on sobbing for 2 or 3 hours, like just ugly cry, sobbing. I've had people that have physical reactions, meaning their body has a lot. It's very common if you have a lot of stored trauma in your body. that can come out in different ways. I've had people also have just big, beautiful, light-filled, love-filled, joy-filled experiences. I had one woman, 76, first time doing this. And she was fully prepared to do like really hard work. You know, she had some trauma in her past and some things that she was working through. So we had talked a lot about it in prep, and she's like, I'm ready. You know, no matter what happens, I'm ready and I can do hard things. You know, she was very prepared for all the emotions and the struggles. But she ended up having this beautiful, light-filled, joy-filled, laughter-filled experience. And she just started laughing at one point in the middle of it. She said, this is so like me to think it's going to be hard when it's actually, this is exactly what I need. I needed to remind myself that I take things too seriously, and I look for the negative. You know, that was her story. She looks for the thing that is hard rather than the thing that might be joyful. And she ended up, as she started to come down, she's like, can we dance? I'm like, yes, we can dance. So we put on music and we had a little dance party for two, and she was having so much fun. And yeah, it was beautiful. So, you know, everyone's story is a little bit different. And if you do it more than once, every time is a little bit different. But, you know, the struggle, if people are going to struggle, it's often in the very beginning as they start to launch with that surrender, because that's the part that can, you know, when people talk about having a bad trip, I always say, what does that mean to you? What do you call a bad trip? Because if you're looking for something with no struggle, no emotion, you know, no hard emotions, then yeah, you might have that, right? If that's what you call a bad trip. But, you know, typically it's when people start to launch that if they're going to panic or get scared, that's, you know, and that's really why you have a guide present. We can really help you. We're trained to help people, you know, calm their nervous system, remind them that they're safe, help them to lean in and surrender to whatever will be. It's not the kind of experience you can control or guide, which can be, for someone who is used to controlling their environment very, very strictly, it can feel very, very frightening, right? To let go of that control. And so that's really what I'm there for. And that's how I help people stay safe. And obviously, you know, for other reasons too, if there's any kind of, sometimes people get sick, nausea happens, things like that. So I'm there to help make sure everything is smooth and that you have what you need and that you're taken care of physically as well.
Have you ever experienced, Michelle, that I don't know how many sessions do people require to kind of lighten their lives, but you notice that this is not gonna be the continuation of this person of having a session with you using this tool. Have you ever experienced that? And how would you able to tell that you require something else?
Yeah, I mean, many people do need multiple sessions. It kind of depends. Some people are one and done also, you know, it depends on what you're working through and how deep some of those traumas and things go. But yeah, many people end up coming back and wanting to do it again. And each time you usually gain something different. It's different, you know, just as you start to change and evolve. It's like we often say in this business that you're going to get what you need, not what you want. You know, just like the Rolling Stones, you might not get what you want, but you'll get what you need. It's very much like that. And mushrooms have a way of really just kind of amplifying and bringing to the surface things that we may have been avoiding, right? But it can be, you know, in the moment. I've had many clients tell me like, oh my God, that was so hard. And that was, you know, that was scary, but I'm so glad I did it. And can I come back and do it again? Right. One of my clients that had one of the most intense journeys that I have facilitated, it was pretty full on intense. Like I was exhausted and he was too after, you know, I'm in the trenches with them sometimes, down on the floor, holding people's hands, like
Yes, of course.
for like 6 hours. Right. So really difficult journey. And he immediately was like, I want to do it again. He's like, this was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I know, like, I already feel better and I know there's more to do. You know, I think it's really about finding your inner voice again and connecting with that instinct that we all have around our own healing, and just kind of really shining a light on that and bringing that into focus. And as when you start to reconnect with yourself, it does feel good, and you're like, oh, okay. But it's a journey, and sometimes some people need longer and more sessions, and some people don't. Some people are like one and done, and they're like, oh my gosh, this was amazing, and thank you, and they go on with their life, right? And it's beautiful.
But would there be any danger of some? I mean, have you ever experienced the frequency of the visit or the session with you that you told to yourself that this is not a thing that you do as a recreation. This is a thing to help you. Have you ever experienced that? I'm just super curious because I don't know how it works
Yeah,
for people who have loved it, but
yeah.
also kind of have becoming, if we can say, addicted or obsessed with it.
No, I have not ever had that. I think it would be difficult to get addicted to number one, it's not always fun, right? It's hard work. I think that there's a perception that people who might seek this out are just looking for a good time or a big
Yeah.
journey and big trip, right? Well, a big party. It's not that. It's not that at all. In fact, many clients find it very, very difficult, and
Mm.
it's a lot of work, emotional work. So
Yeah.
it's not something that you necessarily are like, oh yeah, sign me up to do that every week. Number one, it takes a long time. It's 4 to 6 hours. So, if you do a big macro dose, who has time to do that every week, right? So they're not addictive in nature. Now what I think that there is, if I think from like a cautionary lens, I know microdosing is very of the moment. A lot of people are talking about microdosing, and microdosing can be extremely helpful for many people. But I could see that maybe like people almost getting addicted to feeling like they need that help forever. Really the goal of mushrooms is to not need them. The goal of doing the inner work is that you have the tools to continue that on your own. You don't need to go back to the mushrooms. I myself, I have not had any since 2022. It's not to say I might not ever do it again, because I might. And, just as in life, sometimes we need support. Sometimes we need help,
Yes,
right? Sometimes we do get stuck. And to your point, it's not a destination, it's a journey, and life will continue to give us twists and turns. And, sometimes surprises are good surprises, sometimes they're not. And sometimes we get knocked down, right? And we need a little bit of help. And so I think this is just another tool in your tool belt that can help you, but it's not the only tool, and it's not for everyone. For some people, the thought of letting go and surrendering control is too frightening. And for those clients, sometimes we start with like a microdose, to help them just to start to feel what it feels like to be more present and be more in their body, and slowly get used to that. And then maybe they decide eventually they want to do something more, and maybe they don't. But yeah, I've never seen anyone get addicted to actual mushrooms. They might get addicted to the feeling, that joyful high feeling, which I can understand. But usually, it's not something people can do all the time.
Yeah.
or
But I
even
love,
or want
sorry,
to
go
do
ahead.
all the time, or want to do all the time.
Yeah. But I love you mentioned that it's not just one tool. There's so many out
Oh
there.
yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I think we tend to rely too much when we experience the high, whatever
Mm-hmm.
high you call it.
Yeah.
It could be a high, for helping yourself to be more easy to release all of those trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
because using this tool could help you easier to let that go, to surrender, that could be other people might realize that, okay, let me do every 2 weeks, every fourth week. But the idea of going back on and on, that's why I love you mentioned that this is one of many tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of using it is for you in the end to realize that you don't need it anymore
That's
because you
right.
have
Yeah.
you have already recognized that you yourself, you can help yourself to understand and going through the pain. But at the same time, there were so many other tools that you can explore. And I think that's the idea of having sense, openness and curiosity, so that you realize that, oh my god, you thought that all of this narrative that you have in your mind can never be changed, but here
Mm-hmm.
you are. When you open yourself, you realize there's so many tons of tools. And speaking of tools, Michelle,
Yeah.
I'm sure that you have already, collecting or doing or practicing a lot of tools and resources. But before we dive into that, I'm an optimist person.
Mm.
So, and I know being optimistic can be interpreted differently by different people. And so I'm super curious first to know if you're an optimist or different. If so, what are those tools that you practically use every single day to keep you moving forward and help you stay optimistic? Or what are those tools or resources that you share to your clients to help them stay optimistic with what they're going through and shift their perspectives? Now, if you're not an optimist, still, what are those tools and resources that you use to stay focused and also having that sense of clarity of direction to continuously helping yourself to, fulfill your mission and purpose?
Yeah, no, great question. I am an optimist. I'm a cup is half full kind of gal, always have been. Um, but regardless, for me, the number one advice I give all clients, and I do it myself, is to find a stillness practice that works for you and your life. It does not have to be meditation, because for some people, just the word meditation makes them anxious
Yeah.
because they believe they can't do it, or they think they're doing it
Yeah.
wrong, or they're not, but even if I tell people, do you like to walk outside? Do you like to enjoy a hot beverage in the sun on a patio? Like, do you like to maybe go fishing? Even for the busy moms who are like, I have time, how am I gonna have time for stillness? Like, I challenge them. I'm like, okay, you have laundry, right? You have to cook a meal, right? Like, those moments can also be moments of stillness. Is
Mm-hmm.
how you frame it for yourself, right? Is it a chore? Does it feel like, none of us like to fold laundry, myself included. But can you maybe reframe a chore that you have for yourself in a way that is like, this is an opportunity for me to sit with myself, reflect on my day, or reflect on the day to come, or reflect on what I'm feeling. And that's number one, because if you can't be still with yourself, it's very difficult to practice mindfulness and presence, or even hope sometimes, because you're just in the grind. So that's my number one advice. But for me, myself, my body, I always tell people, listen to your body as well. Your body gives you cues and
Yes.
clues to, I've really started to, and now I can do this because I'm working for myself. So I know it's a little different than when you're working for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But I have started to really work differently now that I work for myself. I'm not prescribed necessarily to the Monday through Friday 9 to 5. And I listen to my body and my energy level. What do I have energy for right now? Because the minute it starts to feel hard and I'm trying to push through, when I don't, and it's not clicking or it's not working, that is a sign for me to take a step back and go, okay, my mind is not in this right now. I'm clearly depleted. My energy's depleted. It's just feeling too hard. And I take a step back and I let myself do something else. I might do something else that's productive but requires less thought or what have you. But I'm really trying to pay attention to those cues. When my body starts to feel stiff and tired and I need to get out of this chair, I take a break, right? Or go take a nap or take a walk or what it is. But so that's another, tool I think we all have available to us every day.
Yes.
And then, but my biggest tool is prayer and my Bible study. I talk with God every single day. And so for me, that is what helps me. That may not be for everybody, but I do think, one of the things I do in integration with each client is I try to help them find some tools and practices that resonate for them and their life.
Yeah.
It's not about what helps me, it's about what helps you. And it shouldn't feel like a to-do list and another thing you're going to beat yourself up over if you don't get to it. Like with the stillness practice, I don't do it every day either. I'm not perfect. There are
Yeah.
days where I have a slammed schedule and I have, meeting after meeting, and I just get through the day and I fall into bed at the end of the day, just like everybody else, exhausted. But I do definitely do it multiple times in a week. If I don't get to it every day, I definitely am having, even if it's just a few minutes in the shower, in the morning, I use that as like a little prayer time for myself or what have you. But yeah, that is my biggest goal with each client, is helping them find something that will work for them. And there's so many options out there now. I mean, you have breath work, you have all kinds of different physical, like yoga and Pilates and walking, being in nature. We know that connection to nature is like one of the best things for combating like depression and anxiety, right? It's really difficult to take a walk in the woods and not hear the bird. If you're paying attention and you hear the birds singing and you smell
Yes.
the air, it's hard not to be present with that, and to really, I think it's just again another reminder that we're very small in this bigger universe that we all are living in. And yeah, gosh, I don't know, that there's so many options out there for people, right? So it's really about what works for you and what resonates for you and what fits into your life.
Yeah, I love and I support with you on that, that every individual has different formula and it doesn't fit to everyone. So there's no wrong or right. We just have to experience and experiment every
Yeah.
single day until we manage to find all of those things that work for us. And, it could change over time, that
Oh,
this
definitely.
work, and then after I'm speaking for my experience too, that after a while I feel like I have to change something else.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. And of course, now we're ending our conversation, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people very, very curious, not only with the services that you have, but I am also sure or assuming that you're also providing some information more of what you do, of how psilocybin helping you, and your retreat services as well. So where can people find you, or how they can connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm on all the social media platform. Well, not all of them. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. At Tree of Life Facilitator is my psilocybin facilitation business. And then at Purple City Experience is the retreat side of things. I also have started a podcast called Beyond the Dose. Just started it like a little bit more than a month ago. So yeah, so you can find me there on all the places you find your podcast, called Beyond the Dose. It's also on YouTube. And yeah, or you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Michelle Harrell. And yeah, I'd be happy to chat with anybody who's interested in learning more about what I do. And, I do free discovery calls with anybody who's interested. So no pressure. It's not a sales call. It's really for you to, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are curious. They're
Yeah.
hearing about this more and more in the news. In fact, just yesterday, Oprah did a whole podcast with Michael Pollan, which, was a big deal in the psilocybin industry. We were all like, oh my God, Oprah's talking about it, right? It's like, if Oprah's talking about it, then we've hit mainstream, right?
Yes.
So I think a big part of what I see my mission in this work is helping to educate people
Yes.
on what it looks like. And that, it's not about tripping balls. It's not about just having a good time. And it's not going to make you want to jump off of a building and fly like we've all been taught when we were young, right? So there are a lot of misconceptions about these plants. And, honestly, the Western world, we're just getting caught up because indigenous communities have been using these sacred medicines for centuries. And they already knew how powerful they were. Many cultures have this as part of their coming of age ritual, right? And so we're just kind of catching up. And, typical Western society, we want to know the science behind it. We want to know all the things. But really, there's a big part of this that is a mystery still. And I think that's what actually makes it so beautiful. There is a very spiritual, mystical side of these plants that I think can really aid us in finding our way back to ourselves, finding our way back to something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's really what the world needs right now. I think a lot of us are feeling lost and unanchored out here, and especially with our current climate, political climate, all the things that are happening, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. I think there's a lot of people out here feeling anxious, and the thing that's given me my faith, which psilocybin brought me to, is that anchor and that peace and calm that nobody can change. No matter what's happening outside of me and the world, I know I'm okay. So, and that is worth everything for me.
I love it. And that's actually something that when you embrace that, let me just figure out who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Because that who am I? And I'm so proud of you. Now you can talk more strongly about your faith and hope. And I know it is not for everyone. And I love you also mentioned that, yes, for many people nowadays, it's a combination of trying very best to incorporate the science behind so that unfortunately many people require that, and so
Yeah.
those leaders that we follow, they're really doing their best to provide the science backup so
Yeah.
that you can be like, oh, okay. The curiosity of jumping, if you are
Mm-hmm.
not able to jump, okay, well, let me have Michelle to handle you, to hold you. And I think also the most important, I'm hearing on and on and on, is that it's safe. I
Yeah.
think we're just so conditioned that once we showed up, what our mission, what our purpose, and why we're here. There are reasons why many people doing their best as well to condition us because it's powerful. The moment that you know
Mm-hmm.
yourself, it's powerful. And
Yes.
yes, it gives you unstoppable calmness that nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah.
And everything kind of like really, really resonated with me. Now, Michelle, I know we're past through the time, but before I let you go, I have this one last question. I believe it's very important to ask you. What will be one truth about life, which maybe you have already covered, that also you have experienced in your life that took you the longest to learn? And it's super important, imperative, crucial for everyone to hear it at this moment. What would that be?
That your mindset really does create your reality.
Awesome.
I know that sounds so cliche and everyone's heard it, but it truly does. I mean, and when you talk about the science, one of my favorite podcasts is the Model Health Show. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but he had an episode where he talks about the science of mindset and how it literally changes your body chemistry. And they've done so many studies about this, especially around chronic disease and things. So, yeah, it is unbelievable, but we do possess the power to create our own reality. And it really is how you frame things and how you see them in your own interpretation and your own mind.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for that, Michelle, and really, really appreciate all of this amazing conversations that we had. I think there's so many words that kept coming back: mindfulness, stillness, calmness, and all of that thing. And for everyone watching and listening right now, thank you so much for tuning in with us. And until next time, with yours
Thank you.
truly, Cindy Marie, here to empower your life. Thank you once again, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and listening with Michelle Harrell. One of the most important aspects of our lives is taking time to slow down, stepping back, and reflect on ourselves, among others. Feel free to replay, pause, and take notes on any information that resonates with you and take action from there. If you enjoyed this episode, please share your thoughts with us and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share this with someone or anybody that who might benefit from it. Follow our podcast, leave a review, and help us grow to reach and empower more people's lives together. Until next time, stay optimistic, stay curious, and don't forget to have fun. You've got what it takes to pursue your dreams and make a positive impact. Keep going and be unstoppable.